Well, it's time now for a quick take by the numbers, where we give you the numbers that tell the story. This morning's number is 50,000. 5 states in the U.S. have provided monthly birth data through December. Those states include Arizona, California, Florida, Hawaii, and Ohio. And their reports show large declines 9 months after COVID-19 was declared a national emergency. More than 50,000 fewer births occurred in these states in 2020 compared with a year earlier. Remember early on in the pandemic, right? Some people speculated that couples who were isolated together during lockdowns might produce a year-end baby boom. Well, even though we only have data from 5 states, the opposite seems to have occurred. This initial data add credence to a survey conducted by the Guttmacher Institute early during the pandemic. That survey found that more than 40% of women reported that because of COVID-19, they changed their plans about when to have children or how many children to have. 1/3 of the women surveyed said they wanted to delay pregnancy or have fewer children because of the pandemic. And for women who did get pregnant during this time, our next guest argues that they deserve much better data on how safe COVID vaccines are for them. Bloomberg Opinion's Faye Flam joins me now. Faye, thanks so much for being here. I know you have a column in which you discuss the lack of data that we actually have when it comes to vaccines and pregnant women. Let's take a step back here. Why do we have this lack of data?
I think that the vaccine research followed the pattern that a lot of other medical research apparently follows. According to the experts I talked to, they really didn't start the way they should have by doing animal research specifically on pregnant animals, just to understand any differences in the side effects of the vaccine or in the effectiveness of the vaccine. And then pregnant women were excluded from the clinical trials, and that might seem prudent, but then if you're going to roll out the vaccine to everyone, including pregnant women, it poses a big problem.
Right, so excluding pregnant women from the trials, but then actually inoculating pregnant women sort of is like a strange thing to do if you didn't actually have pregnant women in the clinical trial.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, in some ways, for other types of drugs that were more optional, it might make sense. But since the disease itself is so dangerous, I think it's something where people can't just say, oh, okay, to be safe, I'll skip the vaccine, because it's not safe to skip the vaccine either.
Well, that brings me to my next question, which is, what is the guidance that we're hearing right now? Because it's the World Health Organization has actually gone back and forth as to whether or not to recommend that women who are pregnant get the COVID-19 vaccine.
Yeah, they went back and forth. Last week they were saying that it was not recommended, and then they changed that. A couple of other groups chimed in and said, no, that's bad advice. So I think the problem now is that there have been mixed messages, and it's sort of being left up to the women themselves and their doctors, but without the kinds of information that they need to make a really informed decision. And that was a problem the experts I talked to were concerned about. And they said, there are some biological reasons why there might be differences in the way the vaccine behaves, in not just in pregnant women, but in men and women in general. So it actually would have been very interesting to get data on how men and women might have responded to the vaccine differently. Did the 5% of people who still got COVID after the vaccine, were they primarily men or primarily women? Was there a sex difference there? It would be very interesting, they say, to know that.
Faye, I'm wondering what the way that we've treated pregnant women when it comes to the vaccine, what this says about, in general, how we treat pregnant women when it comes to vaccine development and drug treatment.
I think that this may point to a bigger lack overall in medical research. At least the experts I talked to said that it does reflect a deeper problem. I mean, we saw that there was a disaster with thalidomide where the pregnant women were excluded from the trials, but then were given the drug. And so I think that was kind of a wake-up call, but that it's still something where there's a lack of forethought. And I think it seems like a no-brainer to do it to use animals, to use pregnant animals at that stage of the research, which apparently can give you a lot of clues as to what is likely to happen in humans.
So Based on your reporting for this column, what does the medical community say? Is it worth it for pregnant women to get the vaccine, or do they risk getting COVID?
The overall consensus is that you're better off to get the vaccine because there's some known data that CDC has put out showing that pregnant women are more likely than the general population to have a severe reaction to COVID, and that there have been women who have had COVID during their pregnancies are more likely to have a miscarriage or other adverse outcome. And so the threat of the disease generally outweighs any risks of the vaccine. And so the vaccine, you can never be perfectly safe, and we don't have that much data, but we do know that the disease itself can be pretty hard to avoid, especially for the kinds of women that are in line to get the vaccine now and are also of childbearing age. They're likely to be frontline workers, healthcare workers, people that could be exposed to the disease, even if they're careful.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Faye, we unfortunately have to leave it there. Bloomberg Opinions, Faye Flam, thanks so much for your time and for joining us. Really important topic.